Let's be real. Raising money for a startup is a high-stakes game. A single pitch can literally be the difference between your vision taking off or your company's shutting down. So today, we're going to break down the official playbook for crafting that perfect pitch, but you're going to want to stick around because we'll also uncover the one unspoken rule that the data says might matter more than all the others combined.
You gotta love a good Warren Buffett quote, right? The smartest way to get through the fundraising maze isn't just knowing what to do, it's knowing what not to do. So that's where we're gonna start by looking at the most common deal-killing mistakes that founders make all the time. Okay, so before we get into the really deep stuff, you have to master the fundamentals. Think of these as the absolute table stakes, the basics that get you in the door and, more importantly, prevent you from being immediately shown out. The first and honestly, the most common trap is just information overload. You love your business, I get it. You want to share everything. But you have to remember investors are seeing dozens of these pitches. Your job isn't to drown them in data, it's to deliver one single, sharp, memorable message. The solution? You have to be ruthless. Cut that deck down to its absolute essence. Less really is more. Next up, let's call it the personality problem. A pitch that's just a dry list of facts and figures, it's completely forgettable. The solution is incredibly powerful. Tell a story. You need to frame your pitch as a narrative. You start with a problem that people can relate to, then you introduce your company as the hero with the perfect solution, and you paint this amazing picture of the future you're building. A great story is what sticks with an investor long after that meeting is over. And here's a big one, weak financials. Honestly, nothing destroys your credibility faster than financial projections that look like they were just plucked out of thin air. You want to avoid those vague, wildly optimistic numbers. Instead, you need to build a shield of realistic, data-backed projections. You have to show your work, ground your numbers in real market data, your current progress, and a really clear strategy. That whole idea of credibility is absolutely crucial for this next part, sizing your market. See, it's not enough to just have a great story. Investors have to know that the potential prize at the end is huge. And you prove this using a framework that, trust me, they all know and respect. First up is TAM, or Total Addressable Market. This is the big, grand vision, the total global demand for what you're selling. A massive TAM shows the ultimate potential, right? It's the ceiling of your ambition. It tells an investor, hey, this thing could be $1 billion company. But here's the thing. Investors are realists. They know you can't conquer the whole world overnight. And that brings us to SAM, the Serviceable Available Market. This narrows the focus. It's the piece of that giant pie that you can actually serve right now with your current product and reach. It proves you're not just a dreamer, you're strategic. And finally, we have SOM, the Serviceable Obtainable Market. This is where the rubber really meets the road. This is your realistic target for, say, the next 12 to 18 months, when you factor in your competition, your marketing budget, and your sales team. A strong SOM proves you have a concrete, believable plan to actually get this thing done. So here's how it all fits together, right? You start with that big, top-down vision of $1 billion TAM. Then you filter it with some strategic focus down to a $300 million SAM. And finally, you ground it in a bottom-up plan to capture a $3 million SOM in your first year. This is the kind of clear, logical thinking that builds massive investor confidence. So, you've done it. You've totally mastered the playbook. You've got a killer story, bulletproof financials, and a super compelling market size. That's the key to getting funded, right? Well, maybe not. It turns out, a massive data analysis of over 48,000 companies, yeah, you heard that right, 48,000, uncovered a factor that was even more predictive of fundraising success than anything you could put in a pitch deck. And this is where we move from the spoken rules of the playbook to the unspoken rules of the game. A group of researchers used machine learning to find the single most important predictor of whether a startup actually gets a significant round of funding. What's so fascinating is what the model found wasn't the top factor. It wasn't the team's amazing experience, it wasn't their fancy Ivy League education, and it wasn't even if they'd had a successful exit in the past. You know, all the things VCs say they're looking for. The number one predictor was the gender of the CEO. In this absolutely massive data set, the single most important characteristic in predicting if a company would successfully raise money was whether its CEO was a man. So it's really crucial to understand what this data is actually telling us. It's not quite that simple. The researchers dug a lot deeper to see how gender diversity on the entire team interacts with the gender of the person leading it. And wow, the pattern is remarkably consistent all across the globe. Whether you look at North America, Europe, or the Asia-Pacific region, the story is exactly the same. Mixed gender teams that are led by a male CEO consistently raise the most capital. They actually outperform all male teams.
And if we focus just on those mixed gender teams, the difference is just stark. When the CEO is male, the team raises an average of $34 million. But with the exact same team structure, just led by a female CEO, that number plummets to just $12 million. That is nearly a threefold difference. The data seems to suggest that investors value having diversity on the team, but they overwhelmingly prefer male leadership at the very top.
Okay, so putting all this together, what does this actually mean for a founder who's trying to navigate this incredibly complex maze? How do you possibly reconcile the official playbook with these data-driven, unspoken rules?
So what are the key takeaways here? Well, first, that playbook we started with, it's not negotiable. That is the price of admission. But you also have to be aware of the unspoken rules. This data shows that a powerful bias is clearly at play, whereas CEO's gender is a top predictor of success. And diversity is apparently most valued when a man remains in that top leadership spot.
This leaves us with a pretty critical and uncomfortable question. When the data shows so clearly that factors outside of a pitch deck have such a powerful influence on who gets to build the future, it forces us all to ask, how does the game itself need to change?